Beck from Breathe and Blend Yoga. Today I wanted to do a specific, very specific class on pelvic stability. So one of my students is coming into her second trimester of pregnancy, and her osteopath has diagnosed her with pelvic instability, which means things like she can't stand on one foot to put on her shoes. When she gets in and out of the car, she needs to keep her knees together. With pelvic instability as an issue, we need to keep the pelvis as square and stable at all times. Now with the yoga practice, that becomes quite challenging because the feet are often apart in various different poses and the hips are turning in various different ways. So what we're aiming to do here is avoid any sort of lunge positions or warrior poses. We want to also avoid things like pigeon pose, any pose where we're balancing on one leg. So which makes doing a yoga class pretty challenging. So this class is for ladies who are recovering from pelvic instability or who have currently got pelvic instability. So what that means for you is that there's some ligaments that hold the two sections of your pelvis, that holds them together at the front and at the back, those 2 points. And those points, either at the front or the back, can become a little bit loose with the relaxin that comes in through your pregnancy, and it can destabilize your pelvis because it's like these elastic bands get really loose. So your pelvis doesn't have that ligament support. So what this class will aim to do is to help you strengthen through the pelvic floor and through the glutes as well as the lower belly, so that the muscles can help support the pelvis. If you are not sure if you have pelvic instability or not, go and see an osteopath or a physiotherapist or someone like that to diagnose you. I'm not going to diagnose you over a camera, but just make sure you check first. But even if you don't have pelvic instability, this class is quite useful for strengthening those areas anyway and keeping the hips in as neutral a position as possible. So let's get started. Starting with a standing cat stretch. So take your feet about hip to shoulder width apart. Draw your elbows back and poke out your chest. Tip through your hips so your butt sticks out. Now keeping the knees bent, tuck your belly button in and reach your arms forward. We tuck the chest in here as well. Inhale to open and exhale, reaching forward. Now let's develop this shoulder stretch as well. Instead of bringing the palms up and the elbows and pinky fingers scraping the sides of the waist, let's open the palms out to the side and open through the front of the chest. Those of you who have pelvic instability that you're recovering from, this chest opening is really nice because, as we know, when we're nursing babies, we're constantly in this kind of a position. So opening your chest up can help to stretch out those shortening chest muscles that happen when you're breast or bottle feeding or even just cuddling your baby. Now we want to make sure we're not forcing our breath to cooperate with our movement. We just breathe, yeah? And then your movement falls in around that. Good. Now let's come down to the floor. Bend, keep your knees together and come down to the floor into a kneeling position. Bring your hands over and just nudge your knees back underneath your hips. Spread your fingers wide under your shoulders. This is a cat stretch on the floor this time. So lift the belly, look towards your tummy, and return to center. Now, with pregnancy, we don't want to overstretch the belly muscles by doing excessive amounts of back bending because your belly muscles are already stretched postpartum or during pregnancy. So let's focus on the lift to help support the baby if you're still pregnant, and to help bring the muscles back in together if you're postpartum. Inhale neutral, exhale squeezing. Push down on your hands. Good. Now, let's take the hands a hand length forward. Tuck the toes under and shift your butt back to your heels. So if you are pregnant, this is more for your first, second trimesters. If you're heavily pregnant, you need to do down dog. Postpartum, this is a good massage for your belly, especially if you're having menstrual cramps as well. Full down dog, you just lift your knees up off the floor, look towards your feet or your knees. Doesn't matter if your knees are a little bit bent, we want to keep the back straight here as much as possible. Good, so from here, come forward to full plank, squeeze your butt. Now you may need to adjust your feet here to make sure that you're in correct alignment with the shoulders over the wrists. Now, drop your knees, both together at the same time. Now, what we want to focus on here is the tuck and squeeze of the pelvis. So you tuck your belly in and you tuck your bottom under and squeeze your butt cheeks together. Also, actively work the thighs towards each other without moving your knees. Good. Now tuck your toes under and come back to puppy or down dog. If you are at the stage where you're doing full plank, come forward to full plank. Breathing in, exhale, tilt and squeeze. And then inhale to lift your butt. Exhale, back into dog or puppy. So you choose your own version of this sequence. Come forward, full or half plank, squeeze your butt, and back into dog or puppy. Now keep your feet where they are and just walk your hands back towards your feet. Now if you're pregnant, your feet will need to be a little bit wider to accommodate that extra person in there. If you feel nauseous, if you're pregnant and you feel nauseous, putting your head down, just take your hands onto your thighs and hover halfway. If it's okay for you to go upside down, then just look between your knees. So a supported transition here, hands to thighs. Drop your butt a little bit. Inhale as your head comes up into a wide position chair. Good. Then come up to mountain pose. Being pregnant, your pelvis is a little bit wider than normal, so mountain pose for you will have your feet wider. Let's reach up. Now, taking your balance here, this is the only balance that I recommend you do. Lift both heels up, tuck your bottom under and squeeze your cheeks together. You can reach your arms out for a feeling of expansion, lifting up as high as you dare on your tippy toes. Squeeze your butt, squeeze your pelvic floor. And then come down to mountain pose. Good. Then we'll turn around and face the other end of your mat. Mountain pose here. Come through chair pose with the hands at the chest. So we come through chair and then we take the head down if that's comfortable for you. Take your hands to the floor if you can and just teeny tiny baby steps. Walk your feet back into down dog position. So we don't take gigantic steps back because we're trying to keep the pelvis pretty much glued together. So we come to down dog. Then you can come forward, breathe in, drop your knees, tuck and squeeze for half plank. Come back to puppy or dog. Come forward to full or half plank. Breathe in. Breathe out, tuck and squeeze. Breathe in, bottoms up. Breathe out, back into your feet. Walk your hands back to your feet. Hands to thighs for extra support. Breathe in as you lift to help offset any dizziness. Halfway to chair. Come through to mountain pose with your hands at your chest. Breathe in, lift up, and exhale, lift your heels, tuck and squeeze. Good. And then come back to center. So that is, instead of doing sun salutations, you can do that sequence there. Next up, find something that you have at home, a bowl, even a Tupperware container, and take your feet hip distance apart. You want something that is about the size of your pelvis. So traditionally, let me just explain what I'm doing here. Traditionally, chair pose is done with the toes together and the knees squeezing together. That sets off a chain reaction of muscle activity into the pelvic floor. So we come through to chair like this. However, because of the pelvic instability and the nature of the pelvis widening during pregnancy, you still got to try and squeeze those knees together and activate those inner leg muscles to help support the pelvis. So, grab something that's about 2 of your fist widths apart, maybe a little smaller, a bit narrower, and place it between your knees. Squeeze. This bowl is a little bit challenging to hold in place, which makes it even more effective. So we sit back into your imaginary chair, gentle lift of the lower belly, but not so much that it restricts your breathing. Now settle back. Good. So camera 2. Like this. Good. Now we squeeze, 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 squeeze those legs together. Remember to keep breathing through your nose. If you need to start panting and breathing through your mouth, you're pushing yourself too hard. Yoga, we always breathe in through your nose. Continue to breathe. Hold your chair pose. Those of you who are still pregnant, this is excellent strength training for labor. Those of you who are postpartum, this is great rehabilitation for your pelvic floor. If you would like to jack it up a notch, lift your heels up. Coming up onto the ball of the big toe, again reinforces that chain reaction of muscle activity up into the pelvic floor. Good, heels down. Good, and take your ball down or your object and put it on the floor. So the next thing we're going to do is a twist. Now twists are really, really challenging to do and keep the pelvis neutral. So we don't want to sit in crossed legs because that can upset the balance in the pelvis as well, especially if you're already unstable. So let's come down to the floor in a kneeling position. Squeeze your knees together. You probably need to use your little object here to help keep your pelvis stable and the muscles active. Come down, knees to the floor, and then take your eyes on the side. Good. Now we want to squeeze the knees together here, okay? If sitting on your legs hurts, then sit on a chair with your facing the front with the back of the chair at your back. Good. So we sit up nice and tall and we actively press the thighs together. Again, reinforcing the muscles up through to the pelvic floor and helping to stabilize the pelvis muscularly. Bring your right hand across and you can take your left hand on the floor or you can wrap it behind your back. If you wrap it behind your back, it's a nice way of checking to see if your hips are square. So when you're turning over that back shoulder, you want to feel as if you're kind of twisting that left hip forward a little bit, just to keep your hips square. Look over your shoulder. Continue to breathe. Release your head first, and then your shoulders. Let's do the other side. Breathe in, straighten up. Exhale, turn. Now just note we have the palm facing out here to help drop the shoulder down. When we have the palm facing down, it tends to add a bit of an extra pull through the arm and the shoulder closes, so this way the shoulder can open. Squeeze your thighs together super tight. Remember, you want to feel like you're turning that right hip side of your hip forward. Even though you're not, it's just counterbalancing the natural twist that will happen if you're not squeezing your thighs super tight. Release. Shoulders, good. So for those of you who are postpartum, this is a nice opening through the chest from all the nursing and holding. So you have a couple of choices here depending on how you feel. If you're pregnant, I suggest you stick with the first one. We don't want to do major back bends, especially in the last trimester and postpartum, because the belly muscles are already stretched. We don't want to stretch them more. But what we're trying to do here is to open the front side of the chest so that we don't start developing a hunched body position. So shoulders back, just like you did at the start of class. And then bring your hands behind you, lace your fingers together. We want to have the palms facing in towards your back. Now, we want to also, imagine you've got a half-cut orange in your hands and you're trying to squeeze the juice out of it. So bring the palms towards each other. They don't have to touch. But we do want to stabilize the wrists, the elbows, and the shoulders and work the muscles in the upper back. When you let your wrists collapse, like this, then there's no strength work happening through the upper back or the arms. Roll your shoulders back, get those coconuts up, and squeeze your shoulder blades together. So you might stay here. Watch out for the dip through the back. Tuck your belly in, keep your spine as neutral as possible. Good, lift, 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 lift. Now if this is hurting your knees to sit like this, just stretch your legs out in front. And relax. And bring your hands behind your back again. Squeeze your palms towards each other, shoulders roll back and down towards your butt. Contain your ribs. Now if you want a little bit extra, just lift your hand further away from your back. Really, really notice it in the upper back when you do this. When your upper back muscles are stronger, then you lengthen the front side as well. Helps to minimize your curling in at the front and support your posture. Good, and then just release, hands to the front, tuck your chest in, pull towards your belly. Good. So the next pose that we can do is fish pose. So just aim to move and keep your knees fairly close together. And just roll up your mat. It doesn't have to be perfectly rolled, but we'll do a supported fish pose, and this is going to help you to open up through the front side of the chest and just relaxing, using gravity to help you So we want to run the mat along your back. Stay there, mat. Good. Now, bring your legs out from underneath you, and you can push down on your hands and just pick up your butt and sit on the edge of the mat. Roll down, belly's in, come to your elbows and lay down on your back. Just wiggle around. Now we want to have the chest open, so have the palms facing up. If you need less of a stretch, bring your hands and your elbows closer in to your hips. If you want more of a stretch, take your arms out, but make sure that your hands don't come higher than your shoulders, especially through the elbow to wrist area, because otherwise you can put strain on the shoulder joint and you can feel all kinds of weird pulling and stuff like that. So we just open the chest up to the ceiling, relaxing down and let gravity do all the work. So this is a supported fish pose. Opening you up through the throat, through the chest. Now you can keep your knees bent, or you can just wiggle your legs so that your legs are straight. That does put you into a little bit of a back bend. I don't find that comfortable, but you might. Just position your feet wherever they need to be to feel comfortable. Please don't drop your knees out wide, okay? Bring your knees, keep your knees together. And let's focus on breathing in through your nose and relaxing. If your mat is thicker, it'll give you a higher elevation and a bigger stretch through the shoulders. If you have a yoga block, you can use a yoga block instead of your mat. It is considerably stronger though, and it does put you into a little bit more of a back bend. So from here, you can stay here as long as you want, as long as your baby will let you. If you are heavily pregnant in your 3rd trimester, laying flat on your back like this is not suitable. So in which case, your butt would be on the floor and the edge of your mat would be about where your bra strap is. And that way you're not completely flat on your back, you're a little bit elevated. The higher the elevation, the better it is for blood access to the baby. And this way too, you've got your head supported. You don't get that nice neck stretch, but you go with what you feel best with. And from here, let's just slide the hips back behind you. Grab your yoga block or your Tupperware container, whatever you've got, and roll to the side off your mat. If you use your lower arm as a pillow, it'll help support your head and make your neck feel more comfortable as well. The other thing you can do here too is use your mat to support the hips. This is going to help keep your hips level rather than having the hip collapse down like this, and this is going to cause a little bit of unevenness through the pelvis. So that's why we have this here, to help keep us supported. So if you are heavily pregnant, if you're in your last trimester, stay here on your left side for corpse pose for your Shavasana. If you are postpartum, you may want to come onto your back for corpse pose. You can also use your roll-up mat underneath your legs. So if your back hurts, keep your knees bent, or you can just rest your legs over a rolled-up mat that'll help tilt your pelvis so that it takes the strain away from the lower back. Palms face upwards, feet slightly apart. Close your eyes and just give yourself 2 minutes at least to just zone out and be in your own space, not having to do anything or be anything. You find a little bit difficult to settle. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Sigh out through your mouth. Continue to breathe and focus on feeling your breathing, expanding your ribs and your belly, and just passively allow yourself to let the air leak out of your body. When you feel overwhelmed, sometimes a little distance from everything makes those things seem a bit smaller and seem quite so bad. So just take some time out, even if it's just 1 minute. Sometimes you're not able to lay down like this, and lock yourself in the bathroom just for a minute. Focus on your breathing. Nothing else. Just your breath and how it feels to breathe. You can stay here for a bit longer if you have the time and space. Whenever you're ready to come out of it, slowly stretch. Gently moving. And then placing your block, your Tupperware container, your prop, and just roll over onto your left if you're still pregnant, or left if you have low blood pressure. Low blood pressure means that you feel a little dizzy sometimes when you get up too quick, or if you are still for a very long time and then suddenly sit up. And then when you're ready, come up to a seated position. So hopefully that's given you some nice tools to work with to help you strengthen your pelvic area and to keep it stable. The other thing, as a reminder, is that we need to keep in contact with our pelvic floor. So the pelvic floor are a sling of muscles that attach to your lower spine and support the inside of the pelvis. So if you can strengthen those muscles, then you're going to help support your pelvis, your lower back, and your bladder from the inside. So how do we access the pelvic floor muscles? Well, anything that a G-string would cover, or with Americans, a thong would cover, pull it in and up. Now we want to make sure that we're not tensing through the lower belly or squeezing your butt cheeks when you do this. It's all just in the undercarriage. Lift it up and squeeze gently. So the good thing about this is that no one can tell if you're good at it or not. It's something that's quite private. You can do it anywhere without people being able to see what you're doing. So if you're feeding the baby, or if you're driving, or you're standing in a checkout queue, you can just gently squeeze your pelvic floor and hold and release, and hold and release. If you're a little bit stronger through the pelvic floor, lift and squeeze and hold it for as long as you can. And then as soon as it starts to slacken, gently release your contraction and pick it up and squeeze again. So remember to keep breathing while you do that. You don't want to sort of squeeze and hold your breath. You need to keep breathing. So remember to practice your pelvic floor as well. hopefully some of that stuff has helped you, will help support your pelvis from an external muscular perspective, and give you a little bit of time out as well. Some of those things we can all use off the mat, whether you're pregnant or not, if you just had a baby or not. This class is useful for anyone who wants to stabilise and strengthen through the pelvic area. So good luck with all of that, and all the best. Namaste.